Ashe family, welcome back to another episode of My Unapologetic Perspective. This is the podcast where we give our point of view of controversial topics from my experience, Black history, and our knowledge as African Americans. Black history presently lives in us so we can continue to excel into the future. It's one thing to know Black history. It's another thing to take advantage of what the people in Black history did for you. I am your host, Martre Baker Stevens, and to the right of me is Shaquan Battle.
Yep.
And to the right of him is Jerome Battle.
What's up?
We appreciate all the love and support we've been getting on social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube. We much appreciate it. We're gonna jump right in. We don't got no time to waste because we're behind on our current events, so we're gonna try to get into as much as possible. Dad, I know you've been fiending to get into some current events, so I'm gonna let you set it off.
Before we get into the current events, I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to go back to something that you talked about on a previous episode, actually a few previous episodes, to set up the current events and why they continue to happen. And I'm going to start with the Black experience. So it's the things that Black people experience in this country, and then the reasons why they happen. And I'm going to go all the way back, give you the first example of terminology that they use. When you say they, we're talking about white America. We're talking about the designers and the authors of the Constitution of the United States. And they use terms like slave and slavery instead of enslaved. Mm-hmm. The reason being, and you guys can go back and watch previous podcasts, and you talked about this in depth on a few episodes. The term enslaved is an adjective,
Sure.
Which, for those that want to understand grammar, it defines something else. And in this case, it defines a person. Slave or slavery is a noun, which already defines the person. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be a person. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. A slave or slavery could be anything in terms of property, ownership, which is why they call the slave owners or slave masters.
Right.
Because they own the property. They were masters of the property. Mm-hmm. They don't want to recognize us as people. Why? You recognize us as people, then you have to treat us in a human aspect, which they didn't want to do. We can always go all the way back to the 13th Amendment. Within the 13th Amendment, they don't use the word enslave. Mm-hmm. It says slavery. Now, the reason was point blank. That was intentional. You go back to the Fifth Amendment. In the Fifth Amendment, it talks about property. It talks about how you are to be represented in Congress. And what they did not want to do is have the South control the elections because of the population of Blacks in those slave states. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you talk about the vote being 3/5 of the population, right? And that's how you don't allow the South to control who's going to be president of the United States. But at the same time, it said it was okay for you to own property. Mm-hmm. It was okay for you to have slaves. So when we start talking about these current events and we talk about why it happens, it's because it's part of the design. It was designed to work this way. And we're going to even get into how the media plays a part in creating the Black experience versus the white experience, because I think that's critical. It's because sometimes we look at the media as being a form of informing the community, the public, and it's not. It's used to inform people that are like them, people that are part of the system that makes the system work, to tell you what to recognize and how to think and perceive certain people in certain situations.
Absolutely. That's 100%. You got anything?
No.
So I got a question for you, because I know you want to get into just talking about politics, and that'll segue you into talking about the political race. we on Wabu's podcast, we talked about, putting black first,
Mhm.
continue to put black first. My question, and there's no right or wrong answer, and the people who are listening could tell me their opinion. When you talk about voting, should you vote black first or family first? And the reason I'm asking is because that could be, that's a gray area in between that. Let's say, for instance, if you work in law enforcement like I do, and the Republican Party is saying that we want to raise up the wages of law enforcement officers to get you guys paid more. Let's give you 7% more,
Mhm.
and which has recently happened. And on the other side, the liberals or the Democrats are talking about, we want to use that money to fund predominantly black schools that are behind billions of dollars of predominantly white schools. Which one should be more important? Just from your opinion, should black people think about their household, or should you think about the people? Should you think about black people in general?
That's a great question, because obviously, no matter what political party you vote for, you're going to have some disadvantages to come with some of those things that you're voting on when you vote one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen. We've talked about this too on many podcasts. A lot of these things, when we talk about the great compromise, Democrats were the ones who initiated the compromise.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about racism and discrimination, inequality, injustice, it's not political. It's not party affiliated. It's people affiliated. So it's the people. For people to believe that they're not Democrats who are racist, you're mistaken, because they are. They're Democrats that are racist.
Right.
All right. So it's not affiliated with the party. But when you think about the Republican Party as it stands today, there's a lot more policies that are in place that are going to negatively impact blacks, black communities, and of course, black families.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they may have an instance where, as a law enforcement, as somebody that's in law enforcement, that they have a policy that's going to benefit you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But they're not doing that because you're black. That has nothing to do with race.
Mm-hmm.
That's law enforcement. That's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of the police officers in this country are what color? White. So when we think about law enforcement in a whole, it's not about black people. That's about law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Now, when we get into this, you're going to see where even in law enforcement, black officers aren't treated the same as whites. A lot of the people that are being arrested from the law enforcement spectrum, when a black person is killed, unarmed black person, or a black person that is not an immediate threat to the officer or civilians, the officers that are being fired and immediately arrested and charged are black.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there are going to be some programs that black people can benefit from, regardless of what party you vote for. But the initial reason for the policy or the law or the assistance or the increase in pay has nothing to do with race.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in some of these southern states like Florida, one of the main things that they're trying to do, they're trying to recruit police officers that fit the mold of the policing agent that they want. And most of those people are going to be white.
I'm glad you brought up Florida. So let's stay there for a second, because we know with Governor Desantis what he's been doing in Florida regarding black people, and I want to go back, because NAACP issued to not travel to Florida, and for the people
travel warning.
Yeah,
that's right.
So let's go back and let's look at history, and let's just look at how some things just. It comes back full circle. We know, and we talked about on this podcast, how, enslaved blacks were here before 1619. Well, right. Black people were here before 1619 that were not enslaved.
Were not slaves.
Historical evidence shows that they were even here before 1565 of Ponce de Leon.
That's right.
Came, or even in 1513 when even they came with some Spanish conquistadors, but there's evidence that says even before then there were black people on this continent. Some of the enslaved people that were brought by the Spaniards rebelled and became Maroons living in the areas of Florida. And then afterwards, the Spaniards had the first city incorporated into now what we call America was St. Augustine in Florida. And it was established in 1565. And many free blacks and mulattoes lived there freely.
That's right.
And the one way that they was able to live free is by ensuring that they would fight. So they were soldiers. Mostly to keep people like the British and the French from taking their territory. And it began a huge battle to the point where you get St. Augustine becoming the first official sanctuary for ex-slaves. And what ended up happening, you had slaves that belonged to the British and to the French, and they would escape and go to St. Augustine. So this created your first underground railroad that goes from north to south instead of from south to north. And a lot of the black men that became ex-slaves, again, took arms with the Spaniards to fight the English and the French. And then, later on, you get the Native American tribes that helped. And then you get the Seminole tribe, which is mixed of Native Americans, blacks, and slaves and Maroons. And then later on in 1738, they opened up the actual first free black community in Florida called Fort Mose, which is about 2 miles north of St. Augustine. And then it wasn't until the British actually gained control of Florida and where they allowed no free black people to come back into Florida.
That's right.
They only brought in blacks that were slaves and continued to increase their slave population. So you run out all of the free black people and you bring in people who fit your agenda. And this just seems like full circle.
That's right.
Right? Because the black history in Florida is very, very deep, especially when you talk about free, because the Spaniards were one of the European colonies that allowed such freedoms to happen. And it just comes full circle when you look at what Governor Desantis is doing, where you're talking about black people to leave Florida, because unless you're indoctrinated with that slave mentality,
that's right,
where you will accept what's going on in this place. And just the history of Desantis, we know he banned African-American history curriculum, deemed it invaluable, and approved Asian history curriculum. Mm-hmm. We know that he tried to pass a bill to promote, support, and maintain any programs, activities that is for diversity, equity, and inclusion. He wanted to ban that. So that hurt what we talked about on the last episode, which was the Black Greek letter organizations, because a lot of those Greek letter organizations are based off of the Black history of equality and inclusion.
That's right.
Because they were excluded from being a part of those white fraternities. He's talked about where woke goes to die, regardless of what mainstream media talk about what woke is today to them, does not negate what woke really means when you go back to the black community or what it originated, which was, where it was to not be indoctrinated with the manipulation of white supremacy.
Absolutely.
So the things that he talk about is what he wants in Florida is for the white history that paints white people in a bad light to never be talked about. And when you do that, you cannot talk about black history. You cannot talk about black accomplishments. You cannot talk about black authors, which is the reason why he's banning books, is because a lot of that success is based off the oppression of white supremacy. And you, like we talked about on this podcast before, you cannot talk about black history without talking about the opposition, which a lot of times is white supremacy, which makes the story that much great because they come from a place where they weren't allowed to do certain things or where they were limited in resources to do certain things, and they prevailed in doing so. So when you look at those cases and you look at the history of Florida, it shows you that we're in full circle of what's happening. And the great compromise is what you talk about, because if he wins the election, we could talk about a huge compromise that will happen along the Republican states.
Absolutely. And again, you hit the nail on the head again when you talked about the portrayal, how black people are represented to the media. versus how white people are represented to the media. And again, just so people understand, this is why we continue to have some of the situations that we have today, because it's all part of the plan, and it's been happening ever since the existence of the country we call United States of America. Just briefly look at how the media portrays black people, right? In the case of Tamir Rice, when you first heard the news story, when it first broke, and they talked about this kid who had a weapon, and the officer pulled up to the scene, the first thing they said is the officer said, freeze, throw down your weapon or whatever. The first thing he said before he shot. We found out later on that's not what happened. But they immediately started talking about the parents of Tamir Rice and how the parents had criminal history of domestic abuse. You start hearing all this stuff about the parents of this person that was killed by a police officer. You don't usually hear that when you talk about white suspects. Let's talk about Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, what they said was the guy was intelligent, he was handsome, and it's hard to believe that he would do something like the things that he was accused of doing. He's a serial killer. But they had sympathy for him, and they painted him in a better light than they do even black victims, let alone that black suspects.
Similar to Tyree Nichols right now.
Absolutely.
They bring up his arrest record, not even talking about what the arrest was for, because when you are homeless, a lot of times you get arrested for petty things.
Absolutely. And there's a reason behind it. They don't do this just because it's something they want to do. They do it because they're programmed to do so. It disenfranchises the black American. That's what they've always wanted to do from the very beginning. And to further prove the point is that they want to say to you that black people are dangerous. So they always perpetrate black people as being the perpetrator instead of the victim, even when we are the victim. What did we do for this to happen? Not that we could just be innocently victimized, but what did we do? So what they're doing is, and again, remember I said the media is to inform white America, not you, not me, not us, but white America, as to say those people are dangerous. We must separate them from us, which is why they live across town. We need to know where they are. We need to limit job opportunities. We need to limit economical growth. We need to limit them owning businesses. We need to limit their education. And you can limit that by determining what they're to learn in school. Why? And this is a great example. We're going to go back to Florida just for a second. One of the things that Governor Desantis did is said, also, we're not going to make books readily available that we think cause dissension.
And all it takes is one parent to say,
that's all it does.
Because that's all the poem by
Amanda Gormon. Amanda Gormon. This is a great example because, and I just want to make sure I get this right, because I don't want to have people have to go and decipher all of the information themselves. But so in essence, what they're saying, and this goes to the point of critical race theory, which is basically, just so people understand, critical race theory is the truth about history of blacks in America and not only their suffrage, but also who the perpetrators were for the suffrage.
For sure.
That's all it is. But in essence, in addition to that, it also provides the resilience, the successes, and the contributions to the birth of this country and the building of this country that represents Black America. They don't want you to know that.
No.
So DeSantis has prohibited and restricted. He calls it monitoring. That's what they call it, right? Amanda Gormon, for example, her writings, The Hill Will Climb, says that the poem is an indirect hate message and would cause confusion and indoctrinate students. You can't make this up.
Yeah, the word indoctrination is key.
Right, exactly.
Because indoctrination, you can look at something as being indoctrination because it's something new that you don't agree with.
That's right.
But what about the old things that we don't agree with?
Like
we talked about this on this podcast before. Right. So indoctrination is convincing me that George Washington was a great man, let alone he owned slaves.
Absolutely.
Convincing me that Thomas Jefferson was this great man, but he owned slaves. But yet in your mind, he's a good person, so it's okay to have this in history class. Perfect. But you don't understand the indoctrination that does to Native Americans and to African Americans.
You do. You don't care.
You don't care, right?
Because you guys aren't our equal. Abraham Lincoln said it best. He disagreed with slavery, but he didn't think that black people brought value to the society in America. He didn't think that. In fact, Abraham Lincoln wanted to send us, this is the funny part, wanted to send us, he used the term back to Liberia.
Back to Liberia or to Central America.
He wanted to send us back as if that's where we came from. Didn't even realize exactly where enslaved Africans came from. But he wanted to send us back there because he didn't think we brought value to this country. Now, Abraham Lincoln they want you to believe that he's the one who freed us. Right. That's what they want you to believe. Donald Trump said when he was running for campaign that he is the next best thing to black Americans to Abraham Lincoln. That's what he said. Right?
Right.
He's right. Because he feels the same way Abraham Lincoln did, is that black people don't bring value to this country. Same thing Governor Desantis thinks about us, which is why they're doing certain things. So you ban her writings, at least through elementary and middle school. But they did not remove To Kill a Mockingbird.
Exactly.
They did not remove Huckleberry Finn. Where they use the word nigger in the writing.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's okay. Why? Goes back to what I just said before. It depicts white people as being authoritative and superior. And it portrays blacks as being inferior. It's okay.
Yeah.
Why? We're not people. They don't recognize us as people.
Yeah, for sure. You got anything?
No, it's a good tennis match right now.
You said something, and I want to go back and revisit it. That and it segues me to another current event. You said that they're in fear of us as human beings. In South Carolina, a gas station owner was charged with murder after he shot a 14-year-old suspected of stealing water.
He was actually putting the water back.
He put the water back. He shot the young man in the back off the store property. So they basically hunted this young man down. Rick Chow, 58, who owns a store and gas station in Columbia, chased Cyrus Carmack Belton down the street outside the store before fatally shooting him. The sheriff's office reviewed the camera and said that the two bottles of water, or the bottles of water that he picked up, that they claimed that he was shoplifting, he put them back respectively and left the store. And the argument ensued into the store. He ended up leaving, and then they shoot him outside. And the first thing that came to my mind when I heard this story is the story of Latasha Hollins, which comes back full circle when you go back to 1991. Latasha Hollins was 15 years old when she went into the store to buy some orange juice. She put the orange juice in her backpack, but had the money in her hand, so it showed that she was going to pay for it, that she would continue to walk around the store. The store clerk grabbed her. She took the orange juice out of her book bag, placed it on the counter, and then when she was walking out the store, Son John Doe shot her in the back of the head and killed her. 15 years old, just back in 1991. This was one of the key things that led to the riots in LA in 1992. And she was sentenced to only probation because the judge had sympathy for her and felt that she was acting out of fear of being robbed in the past.
That's right.
And I just want to say, people want to profit off of black communities while not respecting the black community. If you fear a 14-year-old black kid so much from stealing from you or whatever the case may be, then you might want to put your store elsewhere. Black people, we have to stop giving anybody that promotes to us our money. that don't respect us.
That's right.
Because other people are doing it. We seen it with just Budweiser. They had an advertisement that white America didn't agree with, and their money just went down billions.
That's right.
They've had Target. They had their clothes that people didn't agree with, and their sales have gone down billions of dollars. And yeah, black people, we continue to still give money of people who will kill us, don't respect us, and look at us as being inferior. And we will continue to shop there just because it's convenient.
That's right.
And that money circulates the black community for 6 hours when we give people money.
That's right.
And then those Asians or those white people or whatever the case may be, take our money from our community and it circulates for 25 days in their community.
In their communities.
And we see no progress from it.
No.
And I was listening to this female on TikTok said something, and she said, proximity doesn't give you a pass.
That's right.
And she was talking about because this white girl got onto social media saying nigga and said, this is the way that I talk and all of this. And I've been around black people all my life.
So
proximity does not give you a pass. So a lot of people feel like this because they're in proximity with us and we tolerate them or we tolerate each other, that you have a right to disrespect the black community.
Yep.
And that's just not true. You know, we are more exploited in the world than any other people. People want our money. People want our votes.
That's
and
right.
people want our culture. But we rarely see anything in return from it. If you go watch the N1 documentary, I did not realize that was owned by white people. Mm-hmm. Off the backs and the labor of black athletes, right. You had shoe companies, you had video games, you had all of these things, and none of those black players that played in it got any money now.
Nope. Absolutely.
You got all of these outlets. BET television is not even owned by black people. How does black entertainment television not be owned by a black person? You have all of these hip hop medias that want to talk about what black people are doing and what black culture is and what black community. You go to their website and there's no black people that run the organization.
It makes you wonder about some things that Kanye West said years ago, and he got ridiculed about it when he talked about the state of black people. When he was really talking about the mindset of black people, people took that as he was talking about the physical state of being enslaved. And he was talking about the mentality of blacks. Mm-hmm. We accept being enslaved. And sometimes we do it ourselves. Let me give you a great example of what Bake just alluded to. When it comes to money, when it comes to endorsement of things like Nike and Timberland and Ralph Lauren, and when it comes to the endorsement of these things, how do you think that it becomes popular to black people? Because we obviously see people that make money wear these things, or people that we view as heroes or people to look up to wear these things. Mm-hmm. There's a few black people that I know that came up with their own idea about clothing brands. And when they contacted people in the industry like rap artists or even athletes that they knew that grew up in the area that they came from, and they presented them with this opportunity to be the face of this clothing line, they said, yeah, I'll wear it. Pay me $125,000. But yet the same people will jump on a podcast wearing a Nike shirt or Adidas shirt or a polo shirt, and they ain't paying them a goddamn thing to wear that.
They don't even know what your name is.
Yeah, but you're okay with that. But for something that will benefit black people and promote black people, you want to charge me $125,000 to wear it. Yeah. For what? So we have also been programmed to do certain things, but the system has forced us to do that. Mm-hmm. What we have to do is, and this again, let's just take it back to Florida for one quick second. What Desantis is doing is trying to destroy the light of hope in black people. Mm-hmm. One, hope that you're going to get equality and justice, which you're not going to get. And we've said this before, that one thing that black people have always had, even back to being enslaved, is hope. Mm-hmm. That's the thing, is you're hoping for a better tomorrow. How else do you be so resilient that we can still be here today doing what we do unless we hope for a better tomorrow? Mm-hmm. See, if we gave up, we wouldn't exist right now, right? We never gave up. They want to break us. And that's what they're trying to do. There's a joke. Bernie Mac told this joke before. Bernie Mac said that he wanted talk to God about getting into heaven. And they was like, man, you ain't getting into heaven. And he said, well, I heard that they said if you could ask God a question that he can't answer, he'll open up the gates. So he said he went to God and God said, ask me the question. He said, well, God, when will black people stick together? God thought about it and go and open up the gate. Because the answer is never. The answer is never. We will never stick together. So even in Florida, with all these things happening, and Bake touched on it about, which is huge, and I don't think people understand the impacts yet. When you start talking about stopping inclusion, equity, and diversity training and funds and programming policies that are directly related to that, it allows open discrimination, right? A lot of people don't know this, but affirmative action, although is a federal law, they gave states the individual rights regarding those laws. So states like Florida don't have affirmative action. States like Texas don't have affirmative action. People don't know it. Virginia doesn't have affirmative action as a state law. They don't have that. You have to go to the federal level to prove discrimination in the workplace. A lot of people don't know that. So, and the burden of proof is a lot harder to prove at the federal level than the state level because they want you to go through the state court system first. So when we think about what they're doing, a lot of people don't realize this is checkers. I mean, this is chess, not checkers. This is long-term effects. This is not something that may affect you tomorrow.
Right.
This is something that's going to affect Larry, Sonny, J Boogie. This is going to affect the grandkids and the great-grandkids of this generation. This is going to be long-term affecting. And I don't think people realize that.
Absolutely.
To go on Bake's point, what Adidas is doing with Kanye now.
That's right.
After losing all of that money, can't sell shoes, what they do?
Sell them.
Kanye, you want to come back?
Yeah.
Sell them.
You know, and then with the Kyrie thing, first company that reached out to Kyrie is Adidas again.
And it's been that way. Recently, current event, I just watched the movie Air, which is about Nike giving their pitch to Jordan to get him to sign. And one of the things that they talked about in the movie was the shoe was nothing until somebody stepped in it. That was the basically the theme for the entire thing, that they want to design this shoe around young Michael Jordan and his likeness and all of who he was. And one of the rival ideas was against Adidas, who everybody knows was the hip hop wear at the time. You had Run DMC making songs about it. You had kids in the street, people like LL Cool J and all of them always wearing, Adidas gear. And it's because black people ourselves, when we step into gear, we make that gear.
Right.
We make that sell. It wasn't until, Nike was a running shoe. It isn't until black people say, okay, now this line is a basketball line because we love Michael Jordan and he represents who we are, that it becomes a global thing. And one of the things that Michael Jordan's mama wanted was, if you're going to use my son for his likeness and who he is, because he's the person stepping into that shoe, I want revenue from each sale of that shoe.
That's right.
And that paved the way for these NBA players today to be able to do it. And they were talking, Luka Doncic doesn't have a shoe. Nikola Jokic doesn't have a shoe.
That's right.
Name a white player that, other than Larry Bird, who wore Converse, I believe, that had a basketball or athletic shoe that kids ran to, white or black.
That's right.
Here's the thing. Luka has two.
Who cares?
But look, Luka has two.
Yeah.
Nobody buys it.
Nobody buys it.
And
he's talking about a prominent shoe.
But he's on Team Jordan.
And that's the fact that I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's
nor
on
do I
Team
care.
Jordan.
Nor do the kids care.
Yeah, because they're not buying them.
Yeah, even though respect to them, those two are the best players in the NBA right now.
That's right.
They have a global market because they're not even from here. So you're talking about a whole country's behind them, but yet nobody cares.
That's right.
Even if Ja Morant messed up, guess what? We still going to buy his shoe. Even if Kyrie messed up, okay, we still going to buy. Well, according to them, he messed up. We
That's
still
right.
going to buy that shoe. It's the people who step into it.
That's right.
And most of the time, it's going to be your black athletes. It's going to be your black people that sells your wear. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
That's I seen Mike Wilborn say, you know, when the Ja Morant thing happened, that he's not buying his son the Ja Morant sneakers. Guess what, Michael Wilborn? I am, and I did. That's my son's favorite player. He already got one pair. Guess what? If he want another pair, I'm buying him another pair.
Great segue. Let's go into it.
Let's
What do y'all think from the outside looking in? If you were Ja Morant, what would be your biggest mindset right now? Like, what would you do right now if you're Ja Morant in this position?
Before I say that,
and then I want you to tell me, as a father, as Ja Morant's father, what would you want your son to do, and what would you be telling him in his ear?
Before I say that, I'll say I'm gonna hold Ja Morant accountable to the bullshit.
Okay.
Because now I have to explain to my 10-year-old son about guns.
Mm-hmm.
But not even on Ja Morant. I'm not even gonna put all of that on Ja Morant. A lot of that shit is rap music. I mean, you look, drill is probably the biggest form of hip hop right now. Killing each other is the biggest form of hip hop right now. But the Ja Morant situation, and again, I promise you, I'm putting the onus on Ja Morant, but he don't get all of it. A lot of it got to do with America has been built off of, which is owning guns.
Owning guns, yeah.
And the rights to bear arms. Now, Ja Morant, he holds a gun up in an Instagram live video twice. But the nigga watched Kyle Rittenhouse get off on carrying a gun through the street. He watched George Zimmerman get off on killing a black man, a black kid in the street.
Yeah.
But yet, ESPN reported that anonymous owners came out and said Ja Morant won't be alive in 5 years. But yet, this man still owns an NBA team that is probably 95% black.
Right.
And would take him in a heartbeat.
And
if they could get
Ja exactly.
If you can monopolize off, you can monopolize
take him in a heartbeat if you could get him.
All right. So in Ja Morant's position right now, what are you doing?
He needs to get real therapy, because that shit that they had him do where he was suspended in March, be honest with you, they were second in the West. Wasn't no way they could lose being second in the West. That's why they suspended those little 8 games. If they were in the 7th seed or 6th seed and how close, he wouldn't have never got that suspension. Mm-hmm. He got that suspension because it was 8 games. It was no way they could be caught. Now, what he should do, like I said, is get therapy. That's number 1. Number 2, you got to eliminate the people that's around you. Mm-hmm. Right? Because my man shouldn't have never been on Instagram Live. Right. Big as Ja Morant is, I'm assuming they said that he was in Colorado when the second video, that they was in Colorado, I think.
Okay. You talking about the one in the strip club?
No, not that second one. The one where he was in the car.
Okay.
They said that one was in Colorado. I'm not sure, but that's just what I read. No reason to be on Instagram Live in that situation. And my man tried to move the camera real quick.
But he shouldn't have went live.
Shouldn't have never went live. That's the other thing.
And that's another thing. Like, going back to the hip hop situation, the last thing you want to do as for an athlete or somebody with money in these days and ages is reveal your location.
Right.
So when you on live, like the Waffle House with Chicken and Waffles and Roscoe Chicken and Waffles in LA, where they go live, and then they find out where he at, and he a lick now.
Yep.
Like people know Ja Morant ain't a gangster. Mm-hmm. So if you go on live somewhere and now the real young thugs know where you at, oh yeah, we coming to see you.
Yeah. And like I said, I'll let Dad touch the T Morant thing, but for me, he has the wrong people around him right now. Because this is not the first incident with Ja. The first incident was the first live with the gun. The second incident was when his mans got into it with one of the Pacers players on the court. He tried to come on the court and fight him. And then after the game, they wait on him and he puts the beam, allegedly the beam of a gun, and aimed it at the Pacers team bus. So it's the people around Ja that he needs to have some older people around him.
Yeah.
He needs, and I'm not going to take, I'm going to put some of the onus on the Grizzlies.
Yeah,
they need veterans on that team.
Yeah, you don't have a
Look at what Udonis Haslem is doing with the Heat.
Yeah.
They need veterans on that team.
I'll go and then I'll let Dad talk from the Dad perspective. For one, first things first, I think Ja Morant is in an identity problem that you see a lot of times around this age.
Right.
It's just now it's more magnified because he's a superstar. He has no vets around him, and he's making millions of dollars. But he's having an identity problem. If I were him, first thing I'm doing, I'm calling Allen Iverson. Mm-hmm. Because Allen Iverson had been through it, and Allen Iverson had interview after interview talking about what he would have did differently. Michael Vick the same way. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I think he has to understand that NBA beef is not real beef. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that him and the rest of those Grizzly players took to heart. They thought they was really beefing with like Golden State and LeBron. Like they really thought that was real beef. And that Dylan Brooks too. I think they really thought that was real, and they wanted to bring that flair back to the NBA, but not knowing that it's still a business at the end of the day. Right. So going back into the gun situation, the only one that he did something wrong possibly was the one in the strip club, because of the police investigated that, and he could have violated the law based on what their gun laws was wherever they was at. The one driving in the car and holding up the gun, legally, he didn't do anything wrong. But here's the difference between him and normal people. Him and even some people brought up Chris Kaman that played for the Clippers showing guns in his pictures. Here's the difference. Ja Morant is the first superstar of that franchise. Mm-hmm. You can bring up Marc Gasol all you want to. You can bring up Zach Randolph all you want to. You can bring up Mike Conley all you want to. You go back to the Vancouver Grizzlies and ain't never had no superstar that they molded and drafted themselves and going to put money behind it. Now you're the face of our franchise. Your jersey is going to be everywhere in this state.
Who they want to be the face of the NBA.
Your face is going to be outside of the arena. Mm-hmm. When it comes to getting television time, we ain't getting television time because we're the Memphis Grizzlies. We getting television time because we got Ja Morant. Any other than that, even when we was the number one seed with Conley and Tony Allen and all them brothers, we won't get no TV time. Right. We getting Christmas games because of Ja Morant. Yep. I am putting money behind you because this is a business at the end of the day. Your actions shows me that you don't want to be the head of the business. Not because you're doing anything morally wrong, because we know guns is the prevalent part of America. It's the fact that as an owner, when I can own some shit, this is why black people got to get ownership. When I own some stuff, I get to decide what it is I want for my ownership. Mm-hmm. And if it's going to be you, Ja Morant, then this is a problem for us, because there's an incident where you punch a 17-year-old boy in the face, allegedly. There's an incident where you threaten somebody in the mall and say you're coming up to the mall. There's an incident where you holding up a gun in the strip club. There's an incident where you shooting threes and holding up gang signs, or acting like you shooting a gun at people on the sideline. This is not what I want for my promotion, because I lose money. We lose money.
And he loses.
And then from the black community, we don't want our kids to look at you and see that. Mm-hmm. They want to look at you and see a basketball player. You got almost billionaires in the NBA now. Mm-hmm. You can't go. You got LeBron James. You got Russell Westbrook. You got all of these brothers who are building things for their community. They are building good, positive things. And the thing you want to think about is shooting a gun. Now, going back to why I think he should have a conversation with Allen Iverson and Michael Vick is not just because of the situation. It's because both of them said, when I made it, I brought everybody with me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to lead them people where the hell they at. Yep. That's right. Because they'll come with you and they ain't going to bring nothing to the table. They're supposed to be there to protect you. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't even have the gun. What you need the gun for? That's what hired security is for. If I'm making millions of dollars, I ain't gotta touch a gun. I ain't gotta drive. I ain't gotta touch a gun. I ain't gotta be involved in none of that stuff. And he has enough people around him where he doesn't have to do that. And I think now that the season over, I think he probably got a call from LeBron James. I'm thinking he probably got a call from CJ McCollum. I'm thinking he probably got a call from Carmelo Anthony or Dwayne Wade or Shaq, even though he probably said some stuff on air. I'm pretty sure he probably called them off air. I'm pretty sure he got phone calls. But if I was Ja Morant, this is what I'll do, because the NBA doesn't suspend Gilbert Arenas for having guns in the locker room because it wasn't against the rules to have an unlettered go in the locker room. He got suspended for a detriment to the team by the Washington Wizards for what he did after the situation. So if Ja Morant want to help his case, go into the gym and don't say nothing. Don't post on social media. Don't do nothing. Go into the gym and work, because Michael Vick could tell you one way to change your image is by winning. When he went to the Eagles, they was boycotting outside. We don't want the dog killer. Soon as he throw a 75-yard touchdown against the Redskins, boy, did we get them Vic jerseys selling. And Donovan McNabb, you can go, buddy. If you want it, because the Memphis Grizzlies you're going to be on a short leash. Because if you're not an all-star, we can't do nothing with you.
And here's the other thing: is Memphis is not a big market.
It's not
the NBA.
It's not.
So Ja, you're not gonna be in Memphis long. No. You're gonna be in these big markets like Los Angeles, New York, Florida. You're gonna be in these bigger markets, and you're gonna want to market yourself to get more money. You done already lost $40 million by not making all three of the NBA teams, which some argue that's BS, but you done lost $40 million now. You don't want to keep losing money. My thing is, and this is the last thing I'll say on it, is at this point, it is the crowd around Ja, but Ja is also the wrong crowd.
Ja's the wrong crowd. Let's hand it over to the mature fathers.
Let me tell you, I feel like Stephen A. Smith right now. I feel like Stephen A. Smith waiting to get at this. But as a father, you guys already know what I'm going to say. I don't give a fuck about the Grizzlies. I don't give a fuck about the NBA. I don't give a fuck about how many millions of dollars he's forfeiting, because we've seen brothers give away a lot more money than he's probably going to get on this next deal. I've seen brothers in the NFL decide that they want to smoke weed more than they want to make millions. So that doesn't surprise me. Okay, so as a father, I don't give a fuck about any of it. You're right. Having conversations with people like Allen Iverson and
Michael Vick, Javarius Clinton just got out.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. But as a parent, I go a step further than that, because the first thing is I would, as a father, I care about the individual. Mm-hmm. You riding around with guns, nigga, for what?
Yeah.
What the fuck are you riding around with guns for? So to segue on what we're talking about in terms of current events and what happened to young black people today, we're always talking about the unarmed being killed.
Yeah.
Now you have the armed in a vehicle. He gets pulled over by the police. What the fuck you think gonna happen?
Yeah.
We seen what happened when people don't even have a weapon. You have a weapon. Mm-hmm. What do you think gonna happen?
In the state of Tennessee, too.
In the state of Tennessee. What the fuck do you think? In Colorado. What do you think gonna happen? So as a father, I don't care about all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. I care about you. Why are you riding around with a fucking gun?
For sure.
And in terms of coming home afterwards, that's the most important. We talked about this before. Mm-hmm. I want you to be as proud as you can be. I want you to stand up for your rights as much as you can possibly stand, even if you got to stand on somebody else's fucking shoulders.
For sure.
But bring your ass home
for sure.
At the end of the day.
For sure.
Right? That's the most important. So for me, that's what I would be having a conversation with my son about. Everything else is about what do you want your legacy to be? Mm-hmm. Because you all have a choice while you're living. You have a choice of what your legacy can be. Do your legacy want to be the guy that could have had it all? Mm-hmm. That was killed by cops because you were riding around with a loaded fucking weapon? Is that what you want your legacy to be? Mm-hmm. You know, so for me, it would be way beyond the money that he's forfeited. The other thing is, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, because one thing that you alluded to, and I think we talk about all the time on this podcast, white people aren't the only ones that are programmed. Mm-hmm. We're being programmed every day. The way that we go about our daily lives, usually comes from some type of programming, whether it's white America programming you or black America programming you. And then how you interpret that information to go about your daily activities, whatever it may be. Right? So media, social media, posting shit, that's what people in that generation do. Right? Not making excuses. It is what it is. Right? Very rarely will you find somebody who does not post anything on Facebook. And for the people that don't, they probably used to.
Yeah.
But something bad came out of it when they did. So they said, I'm not doing it no more.
Right.
I've seen a lot of people used to have Facebook pages. Now they don't have Facebook pages. Why? It either causes problem on their job or problems in their marriage. Right? The things that you were involved in, you were posting or liking or whatever, causes problems. So you stop doing it.
Right.
At 23 years old, and I'm assuming that's how old the kid is, right? Around 23 years old. Right? He's living in a society that he was raised in.
Right.
He's doing the things on a normal basis that everybody does, not realizing he's not everybody. Right? So for the NBA or any of these large corporations that try to franchise black people, right? They need a better structure to bring somebody in from that environment to get them to understand what's at risk. Right? A lot of times they just think people giving them $30 million when they're not. There's a responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah, there's stuff in the contract on how you're supposed to conduct yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's shit that come with that. They ain't just giving you $30 million to go out here and ball, right? They're giving you $30 million for everything else. The balling is part of it, right? So somebody needs to educate these brothers. So I would say to somebody like him, instead of just going to talk to Allen Iverson or Mike Vick, go talk to the parents of Len Bias. And for those who don't know Len Bias, there probably would have been no Michael Jordan by himself if Len Bias wouldn't have died on draft night after being drafted by the Boston Celtics and died of a cocaine overdose.
For sure.
Right? So talk to the parents of Len Bias. Because I think that if you start early and having conversations about the things that you want your kids to stay away from, regardless of what their potential may take them, but there's certain things you should stay away from. Right? Guns is one of them. Right? Now, I'm not taking away anybody's rights to bear a firearm. Right? And you can. But why do you need it in the car pulled out while you have a cell phone footage and you going live? Why? For what?
For there's no
right?
reason.
So it's about things like that I think parents need to have their conversations with their kids. And if not Len Bias, there was another guy and I remember growing up watching this guy play. Lawrence Phillips. Probably, and this is arguably, I think he was one of the best running backs to ever play in college football.
That's a good example.
Never really made it big at the NFL level is because I believe he had some mental issues. The brother ended up going to prison for trying to run over teenagers on a basketball court in a car. And ended up, they say he got murdered in prison, but whether he was murdered or it was suicide doesn't matter. The bottom line is there were some issues. Long before it got to that point, they either went dismissed, unrecognized, or people just didn't give a fuck. So at the end of the day, for people like Ja Morant, what he has to understand is most people don't give a fuck about him as a person.
Right.
Not just because he's black. We talked about it to start this podcast. He is property of the Memphis Grizzlies. He's property of the NBA. He's property of the media. Okay? He belongs to them. You violated that ownership. All right?
Ownership is key.
Absolutely. So instead of you worrying about that, you need to worry about humanity, being a person, a good person in general first. Like you said, he maybe didn't do anything illegal, but was it smart? Chris Rock said one time on a stand-up, I can drive using my knees doing 85 down the highway. I can do that. But is the shit smart? Right? Is that something you really want to do? So you can do, in America, you can damn near do almost anything you want. But believe me, there are consequences for everything that you do. And you being black, not being recognized as a person, period, starts there. So that means that anything you do, you have to make, at my job, the COO has a saying that he always say, if you're always doing what's right, you can never get caught doing what's wrong. Right? Now, is that hard to do? Yes, because we're all going to do things. We're human. We're going to do things that may not be right, especially in a court of public opinion.
But attempting to do it
but
right.
attempting to do it right, man.
Yeah.
And it starts before you get to the 30 million or the 120 million or the 250 million. It starts before you get there. Because at the end of the day, as your father, as your brother, as a person that look up to you in the community, as somebody who's watching you achieve these great things, I don't give a fuck about any of that.
Yeah.
I care about you, the person, first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things with Morant is, like, if you look at some of those early interviews when Ja was still in college, like, to me, T. Morant is too much of a fan of Ja Morant instead of being his dad. Even at the game.
And fan and a friend.
Yeah, it's too much of that.
You know, it's tough because I know watching you guys play sports, sometimes I was probably more of a fan or a coach than a parent. You know, I still remember, this sticks out in my head vividly. Remember you guys were playing in, I don't know if it was the regionals or whatever. It was up in Harrisonburg. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I got there late and I got there, you were sitting on the bench. You had this thing where your shoulder would pop out of place sometimes. So when I got there, you were sitting on the bench. I was, what the fuck this dude doing on the bench? So I go down closer to the bench and I was like, what's happening? He was like, my shoulder popped out of place. You good now? It's like, yeah. Then go let the coach know you good. I didn't come see these other kids play. I came to see you play. Bad parenting. Great coaching, bad parenting. You know? So I know how it is to get caught up in the moment, because for me, seeing him play at that level was only going to happen a few times. Right? It's not something that I'm going to experience, but more importantly, it's something that he's not going to experience. I want him to have the best memories of that experience possible and make the best of it. Because to this day, I still think it was situations like that that led him obviously to where he is now. He was able to overcome certain things that could have been challenges that would prevent him. Mm-hmm. Instead became challenges that made him stronger. So I get that. I was a tough parent. I'm hard on kids. You guys know that. But there's still a level of concern for the child's safety that you have to have. And having your son, and he may not know, you know, he may not know that Ja Morant was riding around with a gun. He might not know that, right? But whether I knew you guys had a gun or not, I talked to you about it. It didn't make me the greatest parent, because I'll be honest with you, I was shit as a parent. I know that. You know, you guys can say, hey, Dad, you was a great dad. Okay, whatever, right? I know the deal. I ain't stupid. As a parent, you have to want better for your kids, though. So no matter what you do or what you say, $30 million contracts, $250 million contracts means nothing if your son's not alive. Yeah. So obviously the conversation that Ja Morant's parents should be having with him should be more about him, the person. And then what do you want your legacy to be should be secondary. The first is, as a person, what do you want? What are you doing? Because the way you're going, you can end up in a box. And they won't think nothing of it. They will try to find all the reasons to justify it. Now, if something happens with Ja Morant, what's the first thing you're going to see on the news? Yeah. All these instances where he had guns and he punched a 17-year-old in the face, that's what's going to be in the media. Why? They want to portray him as being someone to be feared. Yeah. He's already gave them the evidence, right? Now all they're waiting for is the action.
Before you close, Big, I disagree with you was shit as a parent, mainly because I remember I think I was like 15, and you was like, hey, you need to establish credit. Go get a watch, this, that, and the fourth. But you're telling a 15-year-old that don't understand what you're saying. But it wasn't until I got to about 24, 25, 10 years later, that I'm like, oh, this is why he told me to go do that. Now, the Ja Morant situation. I remember I was 15, Fake was 14. And you said, look, if y'all want to sell drugs, that's y'all. But understand this. Y'all have to fight me every day that I get off of work. And guess what? I ain't coming by myself. My brothers is coming with me. So again, that deterred us from, of course, we might have had the thoughts, but we never did. It was the movie Pootie Tang, right? I know a lot of people ain't never seen that movie Pootie Tang, but Pootie Tang used to get whooped as a kid, and his friend asked him, was like, hey, you want to go steal fruit from the grocery store? and a bubble popped up from Pootie Tang's head, and it was the belt of him getting whooped. And he was like, nah, I don't want to do that. And that's how it was for us. Like, we might have had the thought, but then it was like, shit, I got to fight this nigga every day. Nah, I'm good. It's not what I want to do. So I wouldn't say I disagree with this shit as a parent. I think you gave us information that we couldn't yet process until we got older.
Yeah, and that may be what's going on with Ja Morant and T. Morant. I think we're assuming that he isn't parenting. I think the media, because of his behavior.
We're just going by what we see him do at the game.
Right. Yeah, but he may have had plenty of these conversations with him, and Ja Morant just still being a 23-year-old.
Right. And Ja grown.
So at the end of the day, man, and we're only saying this is not to antagonize Ja or T. Morant. We want what's best for him, because kids don't watch NBA games today. But they know who Ja Morant is. Ja Morant is probably the most popular player in the NBA, because all these kids who doing the gritty and all of that, they doing it because of Ja Morant and what's my man name in the NFL? Justin Jefferson. That's the only reason that they know them. You know who Ja Morant is? She don't watch basketball. You know who Ja is. You know what I'm saying? And we want our kids to look up to Ja, because we looked up to Iverson, and Iverson luckily had his problems going out of high school, going into Georgetown, to where most people don't even remember that incident anymore, because Allen Iverson changed his life around.
Well, let's just be clear. He had John Thompson in his life at the time, who was bigger than college basketball.
Right.
And just to give credit to people like Dean Smith, when Allen Iverson was looking for a school, same thing for Patrick Ewing, Dean Smith told both of them the best place you could probably go is to Georgetown. Speaking
of somebody, and I'll say this and I'll close. I forgot if it was Sports Illustrated or ESPN. They released their top 10 college basketball coaches of all time, and John Thompson was number 9 or 10, I believe. In the comments, they was mad that John Thompson was on the list because after the Patrick Ewing era, he really didn't go back to the Final Four. Let me tell you something. Coaching is a lot bigger than just how many Final Four appearances you have, how many national titles that you have, all of that stuff. Like what John Thompson did at Georgetown is monumental. When you go to drug dealers and tell them stay away from my players, when you got people like Dean Smith telling them you might want to, instead of come here, you might want to go to Georgetown with John Thompson. Right. Like that is the impact that John Thompson had. When you look at players like Allen Iverson, Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing, when you look at the impact that he had on those careers, and then his son going to coach after him and the impact he had on 9-10 years after that.
That's right.
Like John Thompson is top 10.
And you can do it in a racist environment, because I think a lot of people are confused when you see Georgetown basketball team and you see all blacks. That's the total student body of black people represented right there on that sideline. That's it. So that whole environment is as racist as you can get. In terms of college campuses.
Yeah, put some respect on his name, Big East.
Do you know what number Jim Boeheim was?
I don't think he was on there, and that was one of the gripes. I don't think he was on there. I don't think Jay Wright was on there from Villanova.
The way Jim Boeheim speaks about John Thompson.
Yeah, I don't think neither one of them was on there. I got to go look at the list. I'll bring the list on the next episode.
Where was Bobby Knight on that list?
He was like fourth or fifth. He was up there.
That's your man.
And I think the coach from Kentucky, what's his name, Cup or whatever.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I think he was like 1 or 2.
Who was number 1?
Might have been Dean Smith. But yeah. From UCLA.
The old guy.
God, I'm drawing a blank. I'm feeling like Joe Budden. But I'm like, why y'all talking sports? I'm this and that. But yeah, him. that coached all of them titles. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember either.
Rest in peace, Jim Brown.
Rest in peace, Jim Brown. We love y'all. Peace.
Yeah.